Tara Dowling's going to be our first speaker in this Navigating Space, Place and Environment panel. Tara's presentation is called At the Intersection of Art and Writing, an exploration of language, writing and text in art and art spaces. And you're on the art and writing course, aren't you, Tara? Yeah, cool.
Okay. All right. I might just go. Yeah, so my presentation or my research project, I was trying to think about what I was going to write about, and for some reason in my mind I was thinking about galleries and the language that's used around art when it's being described, I thought about this kind of fear around talking about art and this kind of like over-academic use of language used around it when people are talking about it that really like instills this kind of fear in talking about it. And I think that's even present in people that study it. And it's something that I'm trying to overcome, especially talking about other people's work. And we see this a lot in gallery descriptions. See it at like Arnolfini, these like pasted like paragraphs beside like a beautiful piece of contemporary work. And obviously in like historical contexts, with like more historical art, there's like a necessity for like histories to be recognized, a bit of context. But I feel like these like lengthy art like descriptions that are full of art jargon are really overpowering. And I was thinking about that because in shows that we put on like as students, as like younger people, we don't really have that, and we let the art speak for itself. And I think it prevents you to kind of create your own perception and to sit with the artwork. And it kind of makes you feel like you've got to be active in reading. And Dorothy Ross, she's an Irish artist. I was listening to a podcast she was interviewed on. She was talking about how she really disagrees with this kind of like structure in the gallery, that there's a description and then there's the artwork. And she says how once it's gone from her as the artist, it should be in the viewer's theatre. And I think that's quite an interesting way to think about it. And in my essay I was talking about, and it's quite like an older view, but Pierre Bourdieu talks about the arts as cultural capital, and he says that the arts are exclusive cultural capital for the elites. Art and its spaces do not contribute to class cohesion. It takes considerable training and early socialization to acquire cultural capital, enhancing its efficiency in maintaining class distinctions. And I think it just, there's like a kind of tense atmosphere in a lot of galleries. And I think it kind of embodies this idea that if you don't understand, that you don't belong. And a lot of people kind of leave a gallery in a way that they're kind of apologizing for being there. So I just thought that was kind of my initial thoughts. And then I kind of did a bit more research on that and like descriptions in galleries, who sets these rules of like the length, the kind of type of language used. And I saw this in like a gallery like V&A, for example. On their website, they've got a guide to label making. And they say that they, in their label making or descriptions, they do not want to dumb down or condense so as not to alienate core audiences, and their core audiences being 41% with a university degree and 25% with a postgraduate degree. So I don't know, I thought this was quite telling, and I thought about this in relation to what they would describe, how they describe their writing, and I thought about how, you know, maybe their core audience might change. Might become more accessible and inclusive if they made the environment that way. And obviously, again, I'll preface that there's like a necessity sometimes, but I just thought that was quite interesting, and to have that statistic in the document, I don't know, it was quite interesting that that was their priority, that demographic of people was their priority. And I think we need to look at art in a different way in this day and age. So yeah, it took me on to then thinking about art, writing and art itself, and I was considering my own work because writing is like intrinsically bound to it, and I thought about how if art is this like non-lingual language, what does it mean when the two come to an intersection? And I think about this kind of like irony in a painting of writing, like let's say that it's placed in this position to be considered and looked at rather than just read. And Christopher Bucklow came to Spike. He's a writer and an artist, and he spoke about the painter Philip Guston's work. And he spoke about, he basically said that the indigenous animal self has been colonized by language and that art functions to decolonize. And I thought that was really interesting, and it reminded me of a writer, Kenneth Burke. He talks about this in a work called Definition of Man, that language is a symbolic system which orders our world but limits our experience living in it. In naming and categorizing our surroundings, we necessarily reduce their meanings. And this is all a bit wordy, but I think this kind of brings me onto, and it summarizes these two ideas around language. Summarizes an artist that I was looking at a lot in my essay called Laura Provost. She's a French artist, and she works in installation, and she's really preoccupied with language, its use and its breakdown. And so the first work of hers that I encountered was a piece called Want Tea. And basically she made this cabin in the Lake District where her fictional grandfather supposedly lived, and she filled it with junk, and she captured it all on film, and in her installation it plays in front of this kind of like disordered tea party setup. And her grandfather was also an artist, and his last artwork was, it involved digging a tunnel underneath his home, down which he eventually disappears, and that's kind of like Provost's idea, that's what she claims anyway. And this whole piece is about her like on this navigation to find him. And in it she's navigating language, its breakdown, and understanding and misunderstanding it is really central. And the whole thing is like really testing comprehension and like playing with slippages, and it kind of means so many things and like nothing at all at the same time. And even in the title, Want Tea, it's obviously it's wrong but it's right. So it came from her misunderstanding of being offered, do you want tea? And I think that kind of like summarizes or like explains kind of her use of language. So yeah, you know, like you can understand it, but it's not correct. And her practice is kind of like navigating complications in language, encouraging like this relearning and unlearning of it. So that kind of takes me on to another piece that she did in 2020 called Re-De-En an In-Learning Centre. And it's like a development of Want Tea. And she deals with this idea of like the pre-verbal and the verbal, and their the pre-verbal's incompatibility with the verbal. And in this, she replaces, there's like these spotlights, and it's kind of like cultish and a bit freaky. And she replaces words with these anthropomorphized objects, creating this like coded lexicon. Again, like embracing slippages as this new meaning, and we're like, she's undoing attachments to words. And I think it's like she's encouraging us to recognize our ability to unlearn systems and structures and disturb them, especially the ones that we kind of forget we abide by. And I think language is kind of the starting point. And yeah, so it's like installing this power. In language, she's by changing it, its meanings, our attachments to it. She's referencing like Melanie Klein on object relations and attachments, that core aspects of human and intellectual and emotional development as manifested through our relations to objects and the external world, and how these relations affect our human experience and being. So in that, I think there's this reinvention, this like air of reinvention and reflection, and it's quite a complex thing. And it took me a long time to kind of understand her work and see beyond its kind of absurdity. But we see again like these like bodies of water, really beautiful like depictions of bodies of water and this like reflection in its imagery. And she also refers to Simone de Beauvoir's idea, a notion on human ambiguity, which I thought was really interesting. That although we're bound by societal norms and structures, we have freedom to choose how we shape our lives, what we see and experience. So she addresses these kind of ideas with language as the mode and combining the visual and the kind of linguistic. And there's this, this like continuous navigation and journey that's really confusing. Like so in Want Tea, you've got to climb these like carpeted inclined floors so that you can actually experience the work. And in Relearning Centre, there's all these like barriers, and you've got to navigate these like dark tunnels. Meanwhile, you're also navigating this new set of like linguistic rules. So the whole thing is really, she's reverting you to this pre-verbal state, a state of not understanding, and that's vital to experiencing her work. That's the center of it, that you don't understand. That's the most important part. And then once you can unlearn and decode, you can then kind of imbue your surroundings with new meaning. So I thought about then like how, with all those ideas together, how does her work speak to a wider culture? Why is it important? Why do we need to see beyond its kind of playful nature? And I think her kind of intention is that humans are layered and many things at once, complicated, and I think it's like we don't recognize that enough, that we're not singular. And she goes about this through language and these like systems, and she disrupts them, encourages this unlearning. Again, it's just throughout all of her work is unlearning. And Simone de Beauvoir again talks about this like fundamental need to notice or recognize our fundamental ambiguity as a way to find freedom, and her work literally is ambiguous as well. So there's this importance in it being ambiguous and hard to understand. And Provost treats her work the same way. And I think even in the gallery space, we see she's undoing these attachments to words, but also our expectations of what the gallery space should be like. I mean, she's got like bodies of water, inclined floors, there's carpet, she's encouraging you to act in a way that doesn't abide by how we think we need to act in the gallery space, which is, be quiet, reflect, you need to act like you know what's going on, you can't be confused. It's kind of like this performance of pretending like you know what everything means. But the whole point of her work is not understanding, and that's how we can broaden thought, rethink systems, and undo structures that we kind of forget we abide by, and language is that starting point. And I think there's this tension over language's necessity in the gallery space again, which I spoke about in this kind of like frame of historical work. Okay, there's some history there, but why is a more contemporary piece needing a full explanation of what the artist was thinking? It should be, I don't know, I guess it's all personal opinion, whether you want to read a big paragraph, but or whether you want to sit with the artwork. But I think in her situation, how she uses the two modes, they both enhance one another. And that if we can unlearn, relearn, we can rethink in that sense. So I think, objects, things, people, words, why do they have to be singular, binary, wrong or right? And similarly, a piece of art is not singular in meaning. It should not be defined as a paragraph, should not have to go into gallery, take on this massive paragraph. And and I think I'd like to come back to that idea that Dorothy Ross expressed again, that it should be in your theatre. I thought I'd end on Kenneth Burke's idea again, and I think it just summarises Provost's intention. in her work and what she's trying to change in us to decolonize us of language and help us rethink the gallery space and language. But yeah, that's it.